Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help educate and inspire us. Today, my guest is Karen Rieck. Karen is the Vice President of Human Resources at Farm Bureau Financial Services, where she has been a dedicated team member since 2012. With over 25 years of experience in the field, Karen is passionate about creating a thriving culture built on leadership, teamwork, accountability, integrity, and service. Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Well, let's start today by getting to know a little bit more about you and your work. And so let's first maybe ask you just to kind of broadly set the stage for us. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization and your role and kind of what you do?
Absolutely. Well, as mentioned in the introduction, head of human resources here at Farm Bureau Financial Services. So we provide, as Farm Bureau Financial Services, we provide a wide range of insurance, financial products, auto, home, life, farm, ranch insurance, as well as investment and financial planning. We do that through a distribution model that includes captive agents. So we have about 1,900 employees. We have 8 core states that we operate in, some Midwest and some in the southern part of the United States. So that's kind of the scope of it. From a team size, I have about 25 people on my human resources team, and we really have a shared vision in human resources that matches the purpose of our organization. So Farm Bureau Financial Services, our purpose is to protect livelihoods and futures. And that just goes so well and aligns amazingly with how we strive to create that positive work environment. We want employees to feel secure and valued. We want them to be able to come and focus on delivering exceptional service to our client members.
Thank you for that. And as you're talking, as someone who spent a chunk of my career when I was on the corporate side of things in financial services, I'm always struck when I hear the word captive. When we talk about I'm like, we should let those people free. Why are we holding them captive? Like that word, for some reason, always strikes me that way. I'm like, well, how did we pick that word? We were stuck with it now, but I'm like, where did that come from? It just always cracks me up every time I hear that.
Yeah, that's great.
So how did you or why did you get into this work? Like, I'm always interested to hear people's backstory when it comes to how they ended up in human resources.
That's a really interesting question, and I feel like I came about it in a roundabout way. So knowing myself a bit and my drivers and motivators, I'm a high altruist, right? So helping people is at the very, very top of my list. So being the age and generation that I am, I was good at math and numbers and analytical things. So naturally, that meant I was going to be a math teacher, right? So went to college, got a degree in math and math education, did my student teaching, 7th grade algebra, by the way. And during that time, I really felt like I think there might be another way that I can leverage my love of math and numbers and also my strong desire to help people. So that really led me to my first professional business position, if you will, which is a payroll and benefits specialist, which again, we've got numbers and analytics, but we've also got the people side of it. So while I was at the organization doing that, just learning, had never done anything prior to that. The organization, I reported to the CFO, the organization, they came to me and said, hey, we want to start a human resources function. They didn't have one, surprisingly enough. This is, 25-ish, 30 years ago. And said, how do you feel about starting that function? And I said, I know nothing about it. And they said, that's great. There's a 5-day, everything you need to know about human resources. It was in Chicago. I packed my bag. I went for 5 days. The rest is a little bit history because I said, yes, I embraced the challenge. And of course, as I came back and started to really pick that up, I realized this was it. Like, this is where the business side, that analytics, because you do, as a human resources person, need to know about numbers in business. You can't ignore that. It can't be all, just the people side. You have to mesh that together. So I really found that HR allowed me to take that strategic thinking. That's a big part of who I am, with a people-centric approach. So building relationships, developing programs, and creating that positive, it inspires me. I'm super passionate about it. Um, as I've talked in the past about, like, how did you get here? I took along the way, there were, we'll call them, to the view of anyone else, it's like, well, that looks like a step back, right? I followed my passion. I followed what I thought was right. I said yes as often as possible. That's, by the way, a parenting tip that I used when I was parenting kids at home, but also in, like, say yes, embrace it, see what you can do. And so, even though I had some of those things that you might call step backs, I always shot forward in that process. It brought me closer to where I am today, and it just reinforces for me when I'm working with individuals about where are they going, what's their passion, their desire, their potential. The power of taking risks and also staying true to oneself is what really. So that's how I got here. A little bit of a roundabout journey, I would say.
Any conversation where you're having a conversation with an HR leader who talks about math and talks about risk taking, I'm in for, because that doesn't happen all the time. So I'm in. This is I'm excited about where it's at. I'm glad you found your way to this work, because, and it's interesting. I love asking that question because, I was an accidental HR leader. Most of the HR leaders that I have encountered sort of accidentally ended up in this profession. And frankly, I understand to some extent why. I mean, HR doesn't have the greatest brand publicly with HR, with employees. And so unless you know someone who's in HR and is advocating for it, it's not probably high on your list often. So we have to tell some good stories, maybe get people interested. So,
or unless you know nothing about it at all, in which case
that's right.
You don't know that it's got a backstory to it.
That's right. Well, listen, your organization, it was a blank slate. So you got to write the path. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
What would you say? And I think you kind of scratched the surface on this, and maybe you already answered this, but what is it about your job today that you love the most? Like, what do you love the most about this work?
That's a question that, you ponder and you think, particularly in the work that we do, which is, every day I could say something a little bit different, but the consistent, this would also be the thing that sometimes is the most frustrating about my work, but people, right?
Yeah.
Why I love this is people. I believe, and I really have come into this the last sort of 10 years of my career, is that when we talk about leadership and its primary purpose is to develop people, that isn't just hey, that's nice, employee engagement makes people happier. Like, it is actually true. One of my favorite leadership quotes, I just had one of my leaders retire off my team, and she gave me this wall hanging. And it's my favorite because it says, leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure the impact lasts in your absence. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up my philosophy, how that actually guides my approach to this work. So whether it's programs or enhancing employee well-being, or maybe coaching through a conflict, supporting career growth, my role allows me to foster this culture of growth and empowerment. And I can't think of anything in the world I'd want to be doing more than this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. It's lovely to hear when, people that are in the job they would choose to be in, right? It's just a lovely thing to hear that alignment. So thank you for sharing that.
Now, don't ask me tomorrow or I'm not saying every day. I would rather do nothing else. but the consistency, exactly.
That's right. Well, and I also am a believer that we only appreciate the truly, we only appreciate the brilliant, wonderful things in our lives in contrast to when things aren't great. So if you don't have the bad days, you don't really appreciate the great ones. And so I think we have to have the spectrum.
Absolutely.
Well, let's dig into some of the work that you are doing, because you are doing some really exceptional stuff within your organization around one of my favorite topics, which is connection and helping people feel connected both to each other and to the organization. And I know for you, some of the work, at least recently over the last, let's call it 5 years or so, has been driven by your CEO. You have a CEO that, or at least it starts there, that believes in what you said. You told me these were your words, CEO that believes in being an in-office connected culture, which I think is really interesting. And I'm excited to have you kind of unpack what that means a little bit. Just because right now, right, those could be fighting words for some people because of the whole return to office and the remote versus in-office thing. But I'm really fascinated by how you're making this work. You've been sort of, you returned to the office at least in some capacity 4 years ago, and have had some requirement for people to be in the office at least part of the time for the last 4 years. How's that going, right? How are your employees feeling about that? Because I think this is one of those topics that seems to be dictated by headlines that are misleading. And so I'm curious what your experience has been of how do people feel about being required to be in the office at least some percentage of time, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do was recently at a human resources talent conference, and the topic of return to office, and for me, I was like, oh man, that was like a lifetime ago, right? It was so, and I think it's interesting asking that question. So September of 2021 is when we had employees come back, and when you think about that, at that moment, we actually had them come back full time. No work from home for the first 90 days, and we did that for the purpose of really wanting to separate what did work from home look like before we're kind of back in the office and operating in this mode of finding what a new normal looks like, so that they could break that. And then we introduced the opportunity for some hybrid options. We don't have full-time remote work for those who are in an office capacity. So at the time, interestingly enough, we do an annual engagement survey. We do it every late September into early October. So let's just think about the timing of Labor Day, right, in September. And then I believe it was about 6 days after we had people come back full time, that we sent out our annual engagement survey. So let's just say we heard from people. They weren't shy about their feelings about, where we were at, and, you work through those things. What I thought was interesting is now we are 4 years later, our last annual engagement survey in September of 2024, so it'd be kind of 3 years after that. What I think is interesting is our engagement now in the arrangements that we have. We don't hire full-time remote workers, so we are in the places that we are in within our states, proximity to our offices and where we serve our client members. We are at an engagement level that is higher than we were when we did the survey in 2020, which was, hey, you still have a job. Hey, you're working from home. All of those things. That was a high survey. We are back at that place. So 2021 was a blip, right? It was we're sharing our opinions because with that, and I don't know if you want me to transition here, but I think when we talk about hearing the feedback from that engagement survey in September of 2021 and saying, okay, how do we make this work? How do we sort of settle both leaders and employees and how they were feeling about what we were doing? And we looked at how to do that and came up with a very distinct purpose and vision, which is how do we make in-office time to be presence with a purpose? How do we make it so somebody doesn't sit at their desk and their team member is at home and they're still doing a Zoom call or a Teams call? And that's how is that different? Why can't I sit in my home office and do a Teams call with my teammate, right? So, how do we create that? Well, because here's why. Here's the things that are, here's some of the reasons to be present beside the connectedness, beside that understanding the importance that we can see on a broader scale for our culture what that matters. How do we make it true to them?
When you said that, when we were doing our pre conversation, presence with a purpose, I think that's incredibly powerful. And I think, frankly, that's where most return to office efforts are failing, is that they're not thinking about what is the purpose and how do we make this purposeful and meaningful and how do we do this with intention. And so, and how do we create an experience so when people are together, it feels meaningful, it feels valuable, that kind of thing. And so I'm curious for you to talk a little bit about how you are doing that. What does it look like when you transition? So you, as I understand it, you got your survey, you got your data back. They were not happy. It did not sound like at the time.
Right.
So you're like, okay, we need to be very clear about why, like what going forward looks like. And so you have presence with a purpose. And I'm assuming that then guided a series of decisions and actions and sort of whatever that was, programs or practices. Yep. What did that look like between then and now? Like, how have you built that out for your employees?
Yeah. And that is that opportunity to review that. It really does put you in a different mindset. Some of the things that we did seem, might seem somewhat minor. So, for instance, one big thing is so we have coffee stations, throughout the building and on different floors, and we installed bean to cup coffee machines on half of our floors. We have Keurigs on the other half. So they could go, just like if they were to go to a convenience mart, across the parking lot, they could go and get a latte or I don't drink coffee, so it's all foreign to me, but people love it. It's free, right? We spent I think the first month's bill was $20,000 on coffee expenses. And you know what? I said something to our CEO and he said, that's the best money we can spend. Easy peasy, right? Because of it's that it not only is it, hey, people enjoy coffee and they enjoy their, cream and the coffee and all those other things that happen when you do that. It's also a gathering place. It's also, I'm in the office and instead of sitting at my desk on a Teams or a Zoom call, I'm going to go fill up my coffee cup with the coffee that I enjoy and I'm going to see somebody else from the other side of the floor. So, that's it's a simple thing, but also something that, interestingly enough, has been one of the most popular things that we've done. We also took, sort of the traditional vending machine where it gets stuck or it eats your money. We took and remodeled all of those and turned them into micro markets. That is sort of like a mini mart where it's grab and go. You still scan your card and you sort of self check out, but you've got these options, and we put them within proximity to where people's desks were. We have a cafeteria. We did a whole remodel of that, enhancing what it is that we offer there. Also rebuilding our patio. So it creates this space of, if I have an afternoon meeting at 2:00 in May and the weather's beautiful, I say, hey, let's go sit on one of the at one of the tables out on the beautiful deck that looks out over our property. So again, those are really logistical things. We also, again, another very popular thing is we have a rewards and recognition program, and we bring in, starting back then, and we still do it to this day. I have a massage this afternoon. We bring in a massage therapist who do 15-minute chair massages that employees can redeem their recognition points to have a free chair massage. They love that. And so and you can't get that at home, right? We're conscious of those who aren't in our large home office that lives in West Des Moines, Iowa. We have offices in other states that might not have all of the exact same amenities. So we're conscious about not throwing that in the face of those. But again, it's why do I come here? Our CEO, since 2021, we pair our social responsibility and what we're focusing on. It was food insecurity in 2021 and 2022, and then 2023, 2024 is on literacy. So we have once a month. It was cans and cocktails, right? So we had some snack food. Used our vendor that we have for our cafeteria. We had uh, beverages, so some beer and that kind of thing. And all of our management team members come down, and you donate cans for the local food pantry and cocktail. Right. This with the food literacy or with literacy is books and beverages. So bring a book; those books get donated. And again, it's the social time. You want to be in the office on the days that we're having our books and beverages because you're interacting with leaders, peers. Our executive team is always down there, and mingling is part of that. Those are the things that we did, and we just continue to do. And I think it speaks to the culture of who we are, a family connected culture.
The word that comes up for me as I'm hearing you talk about this is community. It seems
Yes.
like, I think about community in the truest, I mean, even in the sense of like a physical community, a town or whatever, that there's all these little places where people can congregate and connect. And then there are events that are bigger where people come together in a town square or whatever to connect. And it seems like you're doing all of those different pieces through these different programs and resources, which is really cool. Really interesting.
Yeah. Our CEO wanted to do one of the things we did evaluate is wanted to bring in like in our atrium area is a barista and a spot where it was like a little mini coffee shop. Our facilities folks, that was a no-go. We pushed it hard. We tried because again, just trying to create that community. And so our alternative, which people still love, is bean to cup machines, which they still kind of get what they want.
Yep.
They just have to, it's not served to them directly. So anyway, just a little tidbit on that.
Yeah. No, the idea is, I think I've always loved that. I mean, there's real power in proximity, right? And they talk about that sort of the legendary example of that is Steve Jobs when he was at Pixar. They redesigned the Pixar headquarters, and this was a building that I think it held like 800 people, but they put all of the break rooms, all of the bathrooms, all of the like that in the center of the building so that everyone had to come from their desks and offices to the center of the building so that they would interact and see each other and have time. And so it's got there's real value in that. There's science underlying it, not just from a connection perspective, but the serendipity and proximity effect to innovation and ideas and like how ideas move and how connection or how networks work. It's just really powerful stuff. So it's cool to hear about how you're doing that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we wanted, that I know you're really excited about, and I am so curious to hear you kind of unpack this, is as you were thinking about it, I think as I understand it, you were looking for opportunities to not only to sort of foster a feeling of connection on a broader level while also fostering a more inclusive environment for people of all different, you have all kinds of different ways that we think about inclusion. You have launched an internal podcast.
Yes.
And so I would love for you to tell, is this meta to talk about a podcast on a podcast? I don't know, whatever. We're going to do it. But tell me about the podcast. Like what is it and how did it come to be?
I love that question, and I am really, really passionate about this. So you said it really, really well. If we could have scripted it, that's how I would have had the introduction. Um, Inclusivity is a cornerstone of our culture, because when you talk about connected, you have to feel comfortable to be connected, and to be comfortable being connected is about inclusivity. We believe that when employees can bring their whole authentic selves to work each day, that they're more productive, they're more engaged. And when we think about our purpose of protecting livelihoods and futures, that's what we're talking about. So, to foster this, when you think about, well, how does inclusion happen? Well, our belief is that to understand our employees, we need to understand who they are, like what's about them. We talk about well-being and mental health, and sort of that whole self person. We use the analogy of everyone's carrying around an invisible suitcase, right? That invisible suitcase is all the things that they've packed up, from the kids were crying when I dropped them off at daycare, to I've got this big thing over the weekend that I'm planning, and I'm not quite ready for it, and I've got to work, but I need to do this, like all those things. And then mental health right, things that come, we carry all of this. And so how do we give people the opportunity to unpack that a little, or share pieces that they're comfortable with, so that we begin to get an understanding of how those invisible things that are happening, all of the diverse things, all of the experiences, all of the stress, all of the family matters, happy or not, are impacting behaviors, right? That it impacts behaviors. So that led to this. We do a monthly podcast called Real Stories. The idea actually emerged during the pandemic. That's a time, right? We were trying to find a way to connect people when we were physically apart. Also, a period of significant social unrest, lots of things happening in that space. So we put together, the first episode actually was 3 employees. They were all together on a Teams call, sharing their experience related to religion, sexual orientation, and race and ethnicity in the workplace. It was just a very candid conversation with each of them, and we had really positive experience from that, right? It was just received very positively. And so that inspired us when we all came back to think about, how do we continue to use the art of storytelling to build those connections? So this is where this Real Stories podcast platform allows employees to share their personal journeys, highlight some of those invisible suitcase things that happen that we bring to work each day. Um, and we've had employees share everything from, postpartum depression to being on the spectrum, autistic in the workplace, and people may or may not know, overcoming an addiction, coping with the loss of a child, becoming a caregiver at a young age because of a spouse's medical condition, depression, anxiety. We have had, and as our employees listen, we get more and more coming forward to say, I think it's time to share my story, because that storytelling and sharing those very, very distinctly personal experiences, it doesn't just benefit our current employees, but I truly believe that it helps us attract and retain that future talent, because they know that, to be able to introduce a new employee immediately to, hey, here's something, they can listen to the story of, whether it's somebody on their team or not, they know that we embrace and we celebrate diverse cultures, races, educational backgrounds, and that we understand there's something that everyone's carrying around with them. Sometimes it's well packed in and it has no influence. Other times it is just all splayed out and you can hardly focus on work, because there's so many things sitting next to you that you can't quite ignore.
Mm. What an awesome project. What a gift to give people. I have to imagine that there are some people, as you were talking to that and you said, when new people come in, you can share the podcast with them. I'm sure there are some new people that are like, holy moly, what did I get myself into? Like,
Exactly right.
This is very wide open, man. This is not what I'm used to. So that I'm sure, but it says something, I think, really powerful about your culture that, number one, that people are receiving this. Number two, that the fact that there are people stepping forward and volunteering to do this after it's out in the world has to mean that the reception to this for the people that have done it has to have been really like caring and supportive and reinforcing, because otherwise people wouldn't do it.
Right.
I would think.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. The latest episode we just released was an employee who has anxiety and diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder, and it actually led to a physical thing where she lost her voice. It goes in and out, but this is a permanent damage to her, and it's related to stress and things that happened, and for her to come in and share that, following that, we just released it, and the person on my team that helps with producing this, we got the kindest note from her about making the process comfortable. How many people have come up to her and talked to her about her sharing, and in that same breath, and this makes me I have a little bit of goosebumps, but I have someone, a leader on my team, who in the last week submitted a request that says, "Hey, I have a story that I'd like to tell, and it's on childhood trauma and abuse." And I had a one-on-one with her this morning, and I said, "Hey, I think that's awesome." And I've, talked to her, and I said, I'm just curious. And she said, she had heard this employee who she had talked about their anxiety and OCD and what they shared and how vulnerable they were. And she got teary-eyed when she said it. She said, "I've got to, I just knew I need to share because this impacts people. And I know that it's time for me to share my story. Even as scary it is, I know it's the right thing to do." So I get a little bit, it's powerful. Like listening to stories, I talk about, we can't see things that are outside of our view. We've got this window that we look through, and if something's, over to my right, just behind my line of sight, I can't see it. So how do I appreciate it when that's somebody else's world, and I just can't see it? And we don't have to experience things. I don't have to experience anxiety or OCD or any of the things that we've talked about. But in hearing someone that I know, that I can see they work in my environment, right? They work on my team, or they're in this space, and we care about each other as a community here at Farm Bureau Financial Services. And when you hear that, you can't help but it expands the view. My window's bigger. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm looking a little farther out, and I don't have to have gone through it, but I can experience by knowing that that's what that person's carrying around. So I'm not alone. I might have nothing like that, and I also might have something very close to it that helps me understand it's okay. It's okay when that invisible suitcase doesn't close all the way when I come into the office.
This is one of those programs or efforts that I think seems to have like it's a win, 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 win or something. Like it seems like it has all kinds of ripple effects or sort of impacts that are layered. Like it's at least from my perspective, hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking, gosh, it has an impact on demonstrating what your culture is about, right? We're putting our money where our mouth is here, and we're showing when we say we mean, we talk about we want you to bring it all. We mean bring it all and we're showcasing it. We're putting it on blast, not just saying bring it, but we're going to share it. There's that, recognition and learning and understanding of what other people like that, you can hear somebody say to you 1,000 times, Everybody's fighting their own internal battles, and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know. You got stuff going on, I got stuff going on. But then you hear other people's stories, and you're like, oh, they got real stuff going on.
Right.
Like, how do they even show up for work? Like, my stuff is so insignificant. And so there's that. There's learning. There's the opening of perspective. But the one thing that I don't know, and I don't know if even you have thought about this part of it, but the one thing that I think is so interesting about what you're doing, and it's something that I have observed and worked with some people on over the years, is you're helping people take ownership of their story in a way that it becomes, instead of the story owning them, which is why we usually keep it in the suitcase, when we bring it out and we talk about it and we share it and we take ownership of that story and we put it out in the world, now it becomes something that we are in control of. We now own our story, which then allows us to use it in all kinds of ways that are really transformative, not just for the individual, but their ability to show up. And I think that's another effect of this that I'm hearing that in some of what you're talking about, which is also really incredible. And it's an incredible gift to give people.
Yeah. I personal experience, because I think that's what this is about, and this will I've talked about this with people here. This will go down as the one thing I have learned the most from. I am most proud of in my career. I can, at this point, because I have that that motivator of altruism, and I want to help people and developing people, career conversations. It's all amazing, but I only have my sphere of influence. When you start to say, I want to help somebody else share their story, own their story, let them take charge of that. Now they have a new network of people who are coming to them. I didn't know. And oh man, my daughter or my, whatever. You start to build that, and it's exponentially the way that I feel like I'm influencing and developing people. I don't even know the lengths of which that is. I talked to an employee who came forward who had clinical depression and self-harm thoughts, ideations, and she came, and when we did it, and it just happened to be at a time where I had something in my personal life where I had a daughter-in-law who had self-harm thoughts and took action on those thoughts, survived, but the aftermath of that. And so I truly was in the middle of it. And Sarah, who helps produce the podcast, was like, Karen, are you okay doing this? Because there were tears on both sides. She gave me an insight. This employee gave me a personal insight into my daughter and daughter-in-law, to be like, oh, that's, maybe I can't judge because it's not mine, but I can start to go, that makes sense what might be going on in their head, because somebody's sharing their thoughts of what it's like to be kind of in that mental health state. And it's one of the most powerful, impactful things I have ever done. That conversation for sure, but even the rest of them that I may or may not have a personal connection to, I can't help but feel more connected and more open to the things that I might see.
What a gift. What a gift. Incredible work. I suspect there will, I don't suspect, I know there are going to be people that will hear this and say, that's a genius idea. I should do something like that. And then the next question will be like, boy, that sounds complicated. And so can you take us behind the curtain a little bit on, like, what did it take, or what does it take to do this? So like, just let's start with maybe just the mechanics of the podcast itself. Like, because I think sometimes people will overestimate sort of some of the complexities of this. You can make it complex, you can make it very expensive or not. Right. And so how are you doing it? Like, what did it look like from zero to like being able to produce that first podcast for you internally? What did that take?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I would say if this is intriguing or inspiring, anyone can do it. So we first of all needed to understand, we needed to have guests, right? And we, aside from all of these things, we have a mental health working committee that's been in place since 2018, by the way. So we were well ahead of 2020, which allowed us to be up and ready and running. And through doing posts on our intranet every Monday, Mental Health Mondays, we've been doing that for years. We would get responses from people. So first of all, it was those first handful of guests. It was us identifying, hey, I know that person has come forward, has talked to me, has shared. I wonder if they'd be willing to share. And then it was a matter. So I have another person who helps produce. She sits in the room. We typically do it in my office. She sits in the room with a microphone connected. We actually do it through Teams, I believe. So I think you could do it. You could even do it virtually. The ones I've done so far have been in person. The person sits in my office. We have an opening. We have an introductory conversation that's usually 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the recording, where it's like, so tell me, what are you wanting to share? What do you want people to get out of it? Trying to get them to think about what what is it that is going to help you in sharing, and what is it going to help others with you sharing. So we just have that conversation. I don't Sarah does take notes. I just have the conversation, and we sort of capture some of those things so that when we say, "Hey, it's recording day," they come in. Same thing. Come in and sit in the office. I will, let them know that, hey, we can edit things out. We can cut things out if you need to say stop. I need to re-say that. Don't worry. Or you get to the end and go, you know what? I'm not sure that I really want that to be said. Perfect. We take that out, and it also allows me to have those notes from before, where if there's something they really said that I thought, man, that was kind of powerful and sparked a direction for them to share in that first conversation, but they haven't in this one, I'll say, I know when we talked before, right? And you just guide them, and you just care. That's all I do. I don't. I just have a conversation. They we go through it, make them as comfortable as possible, and then um, I have someone on my team who has done some audio editing. So I don't think you need to be genius. I think there's programs out there that make it relatively simple to cut things out. Um, and then we publish it as I think it's an MP3 file that we put out on our SharePoint site, so it's protected within. We don't share this publicly outside of our internal, so we don't have anybody needing to worry about that. But then it's a link. We put it on our. We have a health and wellness hub, and so we have it there. We have it on a SharePoint. We have it on the homepage of our intranet, so people can find it, see what the episodes are, um, and that really is it. Like, it's, if you can have a conversation in Teams and you can hit record, and at the end you can get a recording, and then edit out some things, you can do a podcast. You just have to care and listen, and let it go where it goes.
But for those that are listening and worrying about the editing part of this, know that you can also, there are literally, I think, thousands of freelancers out there that you can hire very inexpensively to do podcast editing. And they do it quickly and they do it very well. And so even if you don't have internal talent to do that, you can do it very inexpensively externally. So there's a lot of, like, don't let the technology be a barrier, because the technology can be very, very easy getting that piece done. I think really having the intention and the courage to kind of step into this and do it is the biggest thing, and being really intentional about the interviews. I am curious about, and this is my last question on this, and then we'll start to transition. But when you have, like, it sounds like so far people are stepping forward. They're volunteering. They want to share their story. How do you decide? I mean, I'm guessing, and maybe not, maybe you haven't run into this yet, but, like, have you had a situation where somebody raised their hand and you're like, this isn't a good fit, or I don't know if there's a story there, and how do you handle that?
That's a great question. And in fact, we just this week had to employees. We have a quick forms, Microsoft Forms, that it's like, hey, what is your story? What is it that you want? How is this going to enhance or educate or provide people with opportunities to learn, right? That's kind of just a couple of
Mm-hmm.
questions. And yesterday, one came in, and it's a it's an employee who's the grandparent of unfortunately a baby who was born 4 months ago that has significant health issues, and really terminal, and it's sad, and there's doctor's appointments and specialists and all those kinds of things. And I was reading through here's the story, and then I got to okay, and what do you want to share? And there was um, the well-meaning family member who said, hey, at least you don't have to worry about chasing after them, which I'm sure it was
Mm,
well-meaning, but it's part of what we do in every episode is say, what are things that people do or say that their heart is in the right place, but it lands completely differently. So that's one of the things. And so
sure.
I read through this, and I thought, okay, it's not the employee. I was kind of struggling, and I went to I had lunch with a couple of folks, and I said, hey, I've got this. And I had someone say, can I speak up, please? They have a nephew who was um, born with health challenges. Now this nephew has graduated from college, but they said, I love the idea that it's the extended family, right? It isn't just our employee is dealing with something big. It's that our employee has a child or a grandchild or a niece or a nephew. And she really put me back, and it was like, okay, so it isn't about saying no, it's about saying it's that opening introductory conversation. What do you want people to learn from this? Yes, they'll connect with your daughter and send encouraging notes, but what in
Mm,
your work environment, what could have made this better for you? What has your leader done that's really well? What could other people do that's really helped or hasn't helped, even though they were trying? So I don't know that there's a situation, if somebody's willing to share, that if you ask those questions, you can't that it doesn't fit. I think everybody's story fits. And that was a yesterday thing, to be quite honest. So
mm,
it's very fresh in my mind about
mm-hmm.
I was wrestling with, oh, my heart goes out, but we don't want to it isn't just about coming and telling a sad story. It's
Yeah.
how do we support that person that in the space where they are.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that makes a great deal of sense. What I hear in that is that there's going to be times where you will have people come forward that probably they're reading it wrong, right? They're thinking, well, this is trauma dumping. And the more traumatic
right,
of a thing you have to share, then the more popular your episode's going to be. And it's like, well, that's not actually the point.
right.
Um, we'd love to have you share your story, but let's talk about then you're coaching the employee thinking about development or about learning or about a bigger context, which is probably, again, super valuable for them. And the other, as we transition, the other thing that struck me as you are talking about all of this, back to the very beginning about HR's brand, is I have to imagine this is also playing a role in demonstrating like how much people trust your HR organization.
Yeah.
Right. It is, I'm sure that you probably didn't need the help given the way that you do your work, but I can't imagine it's hurting that, like, if people are willing to share this with the HR team and they can hear the care, that's going to make them more likely, or I would think more willing to bring forward something that they need help with. So just
Right.
really incredible work. I really appreciate you sharing it. And I know that you are proud of it, and I'm glad of that because it's really
Yeah.
incredible work.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so two quick questions as we land this plane. These are the questions I ask everybody, so I can't let you off the hook on these. So quickly, what is a big challenge or obstacle you are wrestling with at work right now?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that I'm wrestling with it feels like almost on a daily basis, is finding the balance between what employees have come to expect in terms of sort of this work-life integration, and then what the organization needs from employees to be productive, successful, able to meet our, the needs of our customers. So that balance, right? It's crucial because on one hand, we know that employees, they increasingly value that flexibility. They want sort of personalized support that aligns not only to where they are in their career journey, but also in their personal lives. Sometimes those match up and go together. Sometimes somebody could be in a different stage of life, in a different stage of a journey than you would expect them from a career perspective. And then you have from the business, we are and we're in the insurance space, property casualty. Anybody that knows what's happening in that space, it is hard, right? So we need to, in order to continue to protect livelihoods and futures, not just of our client members, but to keep people employed, we've got to be profitable. We've got to we've got to meet the needs of our customers. We have to have that service. And so that's what I balance and am struggling with, is continually challenging my own beliefs and assumptions about how we foster this environment that is different than what I grew up to expect of what work was, and how work and life integrated. I think it used to be a balance. I don't Balance implies there's two separate things. Now with the integration of work from home and all those kinds of things, it isn't about balancing. It's about how do you successfully integrate.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a common challenge that a lot of folks are wrestling with right now, trying to figure out, I mean, both on an individual level, organizational level, process level, like all of it. So I suspect you are definitely not alone in
Yeah.
wrestling through that. There may be somebody listening to this will be like, I have the same thing. I'm going to reach out and connect. So
I
who
would love
knows?
that.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Who
If
knows?
anybody's got suggestions on that, it's a challenge. I think it's great, and I'm glad that I believe that the next generation of workforce, and by that I mean it's not a generation based on when they were born, but just as we move through the future of workforce, I believe that there will be momentum and so for some of the things that in my generation and how I sort of grew up in the professional and executive space, and what makes sense to me, um, I think the momentum is going to swing, and there's going to be this generation of work that's going to know how to do that better, is going to figure it out, is going to have enough momentum to stop having this fight between it should be a balance, which in fact it's actually an integration.
Mm. Mm. Well, that you just teed up kind of what my last question is. You started talking about the future, and so the last question I have relative to kind of our conversation is, when you think about work 5 years from now, what do you hope will be different than it is today? And I say work, capital W, work generally.
Right. Um, I am glad that you gave me the opportunity, that I know that you asked this question of everyone, because I did take time to ponder. And for me, again, going back to this work, capital W, and life, capital L, are very much integrated. So when I think about what do I hope is different, I hope for more civility and understanding and appreciation of differing points of views in our society, because I believe that the way that we all thrive, everyone thrives, is when we have an environment of respect and empathy, and that goes across inside the organization, outside of the organization. This is not a political statement. It is truly, the more things that happen, like what we're doing to really not just talk about inclusivity, or whatever the words are that you use in your organization, but demonstrate this is what it is. I do believe we're going to start to have a better appreciation, and that's what I really hope for, to be different in 5 years.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I want to live in that world too. So that's great. So as we close, the last thing I will ask of you is I like to close with a one-word checkout for both of us. So in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up this conversation?
Passionate.
For me, it's inspired. Karen, this was incredible. This is really, really great work, and I really appreciate you being willing to share what you're doing and how it's working, and that, so that perhaps it inspires someone to follow your lead. So I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
And thank you for listening. As always, I hope you can take this seed of inspiration and education and take it back to your organization. Light a fire, make a difference, make an impact, make a change, show your people that you care at the next level. And please remember, as always, check in with those people that matter to you in your life. It may be the most important thing you can do today. Till next time.